I've covered it once or twice on this channel before, but contrary to public opinion, I do actually have a selection process for the games I play on this channel. It'd be easy to assume that I'm just some jaded early-gen millennial trying to feel something, anything at all, even if it means playing the gaming equivalent of slowly tearing my teeth out with a pair of pliers. After all, I play Jekyll and Hyde. However, there is some method amidst all the madness. I try to find games that are interesting, good or bad, then figure out which of those games would then be more deserving of the YouTube spotlight. You'll often find me trawling websites like MyAbandonware or Archive.org, searching for games that look like they've got more to them than your average shovelware release. It's one of the reasons why I haven't completely descended into the utter garbage of the Steam store. You know the shit I'm talking about. I can forgive a game for being bad, but I can't forgive it for being boring. Other times, a game comes to me via recommendation. Some come directly, fuck you Game Prime, and others are by proxy, such as the game in question today, G-String. Coming up in the Twitter feed of soon-to-be canonised patron saint of the new generation of boomer shooters, David Szymanski, G-String sounded like my kind of thing, a long-time project by a lone dev, Eyaura, to adapt the Source engine into a full-on dark and gritty cyberpunk adventure. Throw in a solid soundtrack, telekinetic superpowers, and the potential hilarity of watching a decade-old engine get put through the ringer by a talented designer, and I was sold. That's why this review is kinda gonna suck for me. It's not that I don't like G-String. I appreciate everything, well, almost everything it tries to do. Eyaura sank an incredible amount of time into this project, which they're still doing. Patches and updates to the game are still being worked on at the time of writing, so I'm going to be as even-handed as I can, but even then there are some problems with G-String that are so fundamental they're not going to be solved with a hotfix. G-String is a sprawling, semi-linear, Lynchian nightmare of sexual depravity, ecological disaster, and circular violence that just can't pace itself. Though packed full of ideas, it struggles to convey them with any real complexity, nor at a rate which keeps the player consistently engaged. Though the many cutscenes and set pieces the game puts you through are in of themselves technological marvels, they can't distract us from the simple fact that G-String is 6 hours worth of content stretched out over almost double that of actual gameplay. Locations which feel at first innovative and atmospheric gradually fall into repetition as we traverse burned out apartment blocks and toxin-clogged sewers for the second, third or fourth time. The charm gradually fades. It's not helped by some level design choices that really push the whole semi-linear thing past the point of enjoyable exploration and into frustrating maze running. Some arenas hide their exits so well that at times I had to quit out and watch someone else play through to see where I was supposed to go. That being said, this is something Eyaura is working on improving, so the worst examples of this should be fixed over time. Just know going in that the game isn't going to hold your hand, nor make the way forward entirely clear. That's not to say that G-String doesn't do a hell of a lot with those same environments, leveraging the absolute hell out of the Source engine to the point where I'd consider it to be the best use of the engine from a graphical standpoint, full stop. Eyaura has done an incredible job of using the scenery as a storytelling aid, not only through the use of billboards and audible adverts, which carry much of the game's textual themes, but also through more subtle subtextual touches. Without wanting to get into spoilers early on, be prepared for G-String to make even the more jaded players feel pretty uncomfortable with some of the stuff it's going to put you through. It'd be a fair assessment to say that while G-String is firmly rooted in the cyberpunk genre, it skillfully draws from plenty of concepts found in more abstract horror. The corruption and degradation of feminine forms, the use of diegetic sound in addition to the score to build tension, all of this and more besides do a fantastic job of putting the player in a consistent state of tension. Unfortunately, it's not entirely backed up by the gameplay. G-String's protagonist, Mia Hiyori, is initially billed as one of a select few of humankind who have begun to develop superhuman abilities, in her case telekinesis and pyrokinesis. Coupled with a biosuit that enables her to breathe near indefinitely underwater, you'd be forgiven for expecting G-String to leverage the absolute hell out of these newfound abilities. Which it kind of does, I guess. Rather than being key elements of your arsenal, Mia's supernatural talents are mostly limited to puzzle solving and grabbing out of reach items from tall shelves. It's not that you can't use her abilities in combat, it's that they're not supported by the way the game plays. Combat in G-String is presented as what I think could be best described as an immediate challenge, where the difficulty lies in surviving the fight, rather than emergent, where supplies are gradually eked out over multiple engagements. While the layout of the levels is built to reward exploration, with most dead ends containing at least a supply crate or two, you'll never find yourself hurting for the means to fight effectively. Infinitely respawning caches of ammo appear with enough frequency to guarantee that you're never truly having to worry about running dry. As a result, combat is not a matter of survival through any means necessary, but simply selecting the most convenient weapon for that situation. It's an effective way of ensuring that the player doesn't run out of ammo when they need to shoot a distant lock or blow something up with a grenade, but it also ends up highlighting how little the mechanics of telekinesis and pyrokinesis were actually thought out beyond their limited intent. Speaking of which, the actual arsenal that you have on hand in G-String is basically a like-for-like palette swap of the original Half-Life 2 weapons. The rapid-fire basic pistol, the SMG with a grenade launcher, the pump-action shotgun with a double-shot alt-fire, it's all here and it's kind of underwhelming. I know that's a bit unfair to put on Eyaura given all the other stuff they worked on, but while what's here is functional, a little more variety would have been nice. None of this is to suggest that the actual combat in G-String itself is lacking. No two engagements feel too similar, often playing with verticality, denial of cover, or environmental hazards to keep you on your toes. The variety of enemies, both synthetic and organic, mobile, static, and aerial, allow for some pretty intense firefights as you have to juggle your priorities between the robot ploughing towards you versus the street cop who just lobbed a grenade into your cubbyhole. Special mention should also go to the fact that G-String includes dismemberment. I may be a cynical husk of a human being, but watching someone's limbs pinwheel out from behind cover in a shower of gore will never get old for me. So to keep this non-spoiler part of the review as brief as I can, let's cut to the chase. Is G-String worth your money? Yes! Yes with a but. G-String is, in a way, worth the price of admission for the visuals and experience of exploring the environment alone. It's an incredible achievement of technical wizardry and an understanding of how to build up a world on more than just direct storytelling, but in doing so it struggles to actually tell the story it wants to. Too much is left beyond the player's understanding, and the game takes too long between story beats to at least keep my attention for the entire runtime. If you'd consider 10 plus hours of enjoyable Half-Life 2 maps for about 13 quid good value for money, then yeah, G-String is totally worth it. Right, for those of you who want to play the game but don't want to be spoiled on the story, now is the time to G through the T to the F and the O. The biggest problem with G-String's plot is, on the surface at least, fairly simple. The story happens at you, not to you. By that I mean, although there are great swaths of dialogue, a wide roster of characters, and a deep and complex background to nearly everything, Mio, and by association we the player, can only skim along this world's surface. We engage with the events unfolding in ways so superficial and tenuously linked together that at every turn I was faced with the one question that every game designer should avoid like the plague. Why am I doing this? At first, this all appears self-evident. Due to a random piece of space debris colliding with the Bort's engineering tower where Mio is being held against her will, at least I think that's the case, we go on the run from our captors through the crumbling tunnels and slums of the city. Think Mega City 1 from Dread with a slightly more apocalyptic feel to it, and you're most of the way there. Mio flees city police at every turn for what appears to be the crime of malicious loitering, but that quickly graduates into multiple homicides, so I can kind of understand why the cops end up throwing everything at her pretty quickly. We come into contact with a member of the Underground, a network of rebels trying to unseat the oligarchs that rule this wasteland we call Earth, but aside from some warnings about the dangers ahead, we're given no direction, no objective other than to keep running. This is pretty much the main problem with G-String storytelling. It expects you to provide your own motivation. You enter a level with the intent of exiting it, yes, but there are only so many times you can do that before even the most emotionally calcified gamer requires a bit of a nudge, giving the metaphorical rat a nibble of the metaphorical cheese to remind it of what waits at the end of the metaphorical maze. And now I want cheese. Even if you can provide your own motivation to power through G-String's somewhat overlong runtime in a minimal direction, there's also the matter of how the game communicates what it does say. As I write this, I'm referring to the Beauty Secrets PDF that Eyaura released alongside the game, a kind of text companion which contains a huge amount of additional information and context for the game's events, as well as a bunch of stuff that I'm really surprised the game dropped the ball on. For example, at least according to the document, Mio is an orphan due to the Friday floods, a catastrophic weather event that wiped out most of Southeast Asia, killing not only her parents but also her girlfriend Jodie. In-game, I guess that's who the mysterious female voice is that talks to us once or twice? For a long time I thought that Jodie was this girl we see in a test tube during one cutscene, but no, that's the cryogenically frozen wife of that gravity-defying bastard over there who... Ah! I understand that a screenwriter's axiom is show, don't tell, but if all you do is show and you never end up telling, then you're going to leave most of the audience fucking baffled. There are multiple cutscenes that depict some Lynchian Red Room space where the voice talks to us some more, but then what's with the meat tunnels? Why does this tentacle have fucking lips? Throughout the game, we bounce back and forth between these 2 points, either grasping for motivation or struggling to pass the absurdity of these dream sequences. It's not helped by the fact that the Beauty Secrets document provides no context for these dream sequences either. At the risk of sounding cruel, I feel as if Eyaura understands the surface aspects of surrealism, but can't or won't dig deeper into it. The abstract landscapes and cryptic dialogue we encounter in the game feel coincidental to the rest of the experience, a brief aside to flex some creative muscles, but nothing more than that. I'm sounding really snobbish, and I'll admit that, but I think I may also have a handle on what the problem with G-String may actually be, because I'm guilty of it myself. G-String took 12 years to make, tens of thousands of hours and the input of other people besides. Over time it can be hard to maintain creative clarity due to having to scrap a level that doesn't work or a sequence that won't gel with the stuff around it. You start papering over the idea you'd started with over and over again until you almost forget what the shape was underneath. I did this with Strangers Abroad, a New Vegas mod I made back in 2012. It started as something small and episodic, but as time went on, it evolved and ultimately ran out of control into something I just couldn't keep up with. I wrote myself into a corner and eventually stepped away from it. I'm still proud of what I was able to accomplish with minimal skill and the support of a great crew of wonderful people who provided the voice acting, but I still recognise that it was my fault that the project collapsed. I'm not saying that Eyaura shouldn't have made this game, or made it quicker, but I do want to suggest this as a reason as to why G-String has such a hard time staying consistently enjoyable. The plot beats lack focus because there may not have been a clear idea what was going to happen next. Characters lack context because there was no clear way to convey it in the time and space available. The game's pacing drags on as a consequence of overproductivity trying to cram as much into the game as possible. With a dedicated team, someone to direct the game's production in a clearer manner, perhaps this would have been caught. A bit of judicious trimming here and there and you have a tight 6 to 8 hour action game rather than a flabby 12-hour one. There is also... the thing. I debated on whether or not to include this. I have actually reached out to Eyaura on Twitter and as of now I haven't had any response. I'll amend the video's description if I get a response, just know going in that I'm not implying anything direct, but I do want to bring up something that nobody else has really brought up as far as I'm aware. G-String has an anti-Islamic undercurrent to it which I'm not sure is simply misguided writing or actively intended as subtext. While it's less overt in the game's title crawl, the Beauty Secrets document states that Europe now has a Muslim majority, whereas the game's title crawl states that the oil wars have resulted in an influx of migrants into Europe. Later on, a nuclear bomb is detonated over the gold reserve in the middle of the city. It's a genuinely affecting moment where the music dies back and all you can hear is the distant roar emanating from the mushroom cloud and the desperate screaming of all those still living in the slums around you. Then, in the following level, you're told that it was the Muslim wing of the underground, who the design document describes as the most brutal and uncompromising, who are responsible for the attack. None of this needed to be specifically attributed to the Muslim wing. I don't know why it's here, but it's kind of weird that Eyaura chose to be this specific about this particular thing. As I said earlier, I'm not going to call anyone out, but I definitely question the intent behind this. And to be clear, this isn't me picking favourites. I didn't really like Far Cry 5's bastardised depiction of militant Christianity either. Some games seem to rely on religion as a lazy shorthand for being dogmatic arseholes, and I'm kind of sick of it, to be honest. Anyway, to wrap things up, I still appreciate G-String as a project. I hope Eyaura uses the success of this game to springboard into something bigger and better, though I do hope whatever they make next has a little more oversight and guidance from a more experienced hand within the industry. Would I recommend it even still? As I said before, yes, but if you can forgive G-String's lack of focus and motivation and engage with the gameplay on its most direct level, there's a lot to love. If you want to immerse yourself in a graphically rich and layered world, then there's plenty to enjoy. Just know that you are going to be bringing a little bit more to this game than you really may expect. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you for listening to me ramble on, and I will catch you lovely people later. Stay safe and be good.